I've got that outlined and I'm starting to kind of hammer that out. But I'm actually writing a literary mystery at the same time, and I'm probably about 10 chapters into that. And I love it. I think about it all the time. But with Smart Mouth, next week my agent is actually taking me and the other agents to New York, to this Book Expo of America, and probably to you that sounds like, oh, whoop-de-doo. Well, to me that's like going to the biggest collection of rock stars in one place of all time, and they're all going to be in one building. And while we're there, my agent has a meeting set up with the head acquisition editor of Viking Publishing, which is one of the biggest houses, and he's pitching my book there. And one of the Penguin editors has my book on her desk already. So I kind of think Penguin might get published, but it's not going to. And so then you could buy a print version. And that would be really nice, because I could stop selling myself on the internet. And so I guess at this point, I feel like I've been talking about myself forever. So do you guys have any questions? And I could talk about the writing process or more about what it means to work for a literary agency. I don't know.
Initially you said that you didn't want to self-publish, so what made you change your mind towards that?
My agent. When I started working for him, one of the projects that he had me start with is he has a bunch of clientele. He has about 100 authors that he represents. That basically he goes out and he takes their books and proposes them to the publishers and tries to get them. He pitches the books to them and tries to get them to buy it. Like what you guys were doing in your class when you pitched your book to the class and tried to get them to read it. He does that with the publishers. Well, sometimes those books go out of print. He has a lot of authors that have been New York bestsellers and tons of them actually. But some of the times those books go out of print, and so he asked me to take some of those books and upload them and start selling them online through Amazon. And I had no idea how to do that. So we decided to use my book as a guinea pig. So that's how I got there. And I'm glad I did. I'm happy to have it out there. I mean, it's better that than it's sitting in a shelf. I worked on it forever. And yeah, that's how I did that. Any other questions?
Were there any special ways you would work through writer's block if you ever got it?
You know, I always work best when I am either, we'll call it a restaurant, at a restaurant or a cafe. I have to sit down where it's kind of loud, and that's what I have to do when I get writer's block. I have to leave my house. And if I'm really into writing, I could sit and write for 3 days and not move. But if I have stopped and I need to start again, I have to have white noise around me. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I can't do it just by myself, sitting in a quiet room like most normal people. But it might be too, I'm listening, part of me is listening to conversations that are going on around me, and I might pick up a slice of what someone says. Well, that's kind of interesting. Or even how they say it, or I can tell that two people are fighting, and I was like, I wonder what they're fighting about. And then I can incorporate that into what I'm writing. So that's how I usually get rid of my writer's block, is I go and eavesdrop on other people and then incorporate it into my story. So you might be in my book, you never know. Do you guys have any other questions?
You said something about a screenplay.
So I have a friend whose brother is a director at Lionsgate, which is one of the big things down in Hollywood. And he really liked the story, and so he wrote it as a screenplay. And I have one of the earlier drafts of the screenplay is actually up on my website. There's a link to it. But the director actually has liked it. He's read it and liked it, and he's not going to do it though, of course. That would just be way too easy. But he's talking to other people about it. So that would be amazing. I can't even tell you how easy that would be for me, because then I wouldn't have to do anything. Someone else would be doing the work, and I would be watching my story be made. And I'm lazy. I think that would be amazing. I would love for someone else to do the work like that.
So you said it took take you forever to write it? Define forever. How long did it take you not to get it published, but just to finish the book?
Well, I started when I was really sick, and honestly, when I was able to get out like the first 3 chapters pretty quickly, but they were pretty rough. And then after that, sometimes I could only write a sentence a day. I had a hard time. I was really dizzy, and so I had to lay down a lot. I couldn't move my head, and so I would get up, and sometimes I would just write a sentence and a paragraph. But after about 6 months, I think I was only on like chapter 7 or 8, and then I decided I want to move this along. And that was when I got the editor, and I decided between the two of us, she made me accountable for chapters every week. So I had to give her 1 to 2 chapters every Tuesday. And I stuck by that. And so then I had my book finished within 6 months. And I'm talking about draft, right? Because then I had to keep going back and writing drafts. Like the first time I met with my agent, he flipped through it, and within, I don't know, the first 3 chapters, he's like, oh, you have to, what, she's married? That's not going to work. You have to go, that's a boyfriend. And then this whole chapter right here, I'm not sure why you wrote it. And so I had to go back and do another revision. And you know, if publishers pick this up and they choose to do a print run of it, I'll have to do another draft. Their editors will make me do changes. So really, the bulk of the book I wrote in 6 months, but I'm still going to be editing it. And actually, I'm really embarrassed that the ebook version has typos in it. And I can't bear that. And I've had, I don't know how many readers go back through it and try to catch those for me, but they're there. And that drives me crazy. And I know if you do a print run, those would be caught. But the one that drives me the most crazy, the one typo that's in there, it's a homonym. And it says, she said in a hoarse whisper. And it's horse, H-O-R-S-E. It drives me mad. I can't stand that it's in there. So I will be happy to actually go back and fix that, but I'd have to re-upload it, and I might miss 1 sale a day if I do that. So. Any other questions?
How far into thinking out your minor characters do you go?
When I first start the book, I have maybe a 2 or 3 sentence description of the characters that I want to do. And then as I get further into the books, they start to come alive. And the descriptions change. Sometimes I have to go back and change them. So I keep a notebook of my characters, especially the minor characters, because they're the worst to keep track of. Because you might not have mentioned them for 3 or 4 chapters, and then you're like, did that guy have red hair? I can't remember. And so you have to go back and check it. But so you end up, I think I do more character development as a side note, like in a journal on the side characters, almost than I do on the main characters, because I'm always with the main characters. So I see them all the time. I get what they're like. But those side characters, sometimes I forget attributes or something. So I have to develop them more in a writing journal than the main characters sometimes. That's a good question. Anything else?
What literary classics would you say inspires you? Do you return to a certain book whenever you need inspiration?
Well, you guys aren't going to want to hear this, but my favorite all-time story is Beowulf, and there's a translation by Seamus Heaney that is really easy to read. But the Beowulf story of good versus evil, that just can't be beat. I love that story so much, and the characters in that story, it's phenomenal. I would say the book that you guys read, Geek Love, I love that book. I'm so happy to see that you guys, it's bizarre and strange, but the character development in that is so tight. Let's see. I always like the Inferno, which of course is another old book, but that's talking about what's evil, what's good. You know, and that is, when you're writing a book, that is, what a strong storyline to develop. You know, if your characters, you don't want them to be black and white. You want them to be a little bit evil and a little bit good, but then worry about it maybe. Oh, I just did something wrong. So, and I think the Inferno really, Dante's Inferno really delves into that, obviously pretty deeply, because they're all in hell for different reasons. So that's a great one. something newer. Toni Morrison books, to me, I always like reading. I don't know, there's so many. I'm a freakish reader. I have to admit, I love reading everything. Anything else?
Is there any advice that you would give yourself, if you could give your younger self, or any advice that you wish somebody had given you when you first started writing this book?
When I first started writing Smart Mouth, I wish that I had actually done it every day and sat down and set up a schedule to do it. And maybe I wouldn't have stuck by that schedule every time, but it's really hard when you're sporadic, especially when you're writing a novel, because you get into the pattern of the characters, you feel those people, and you are really sunk into what's happening to them. And if you stop writing about that and you think, oh, I've got a lot of things to do, and you put that off for a week, by the time you come back, you've lost that emotion. It's really hard to sink yourself back into that same place. So I would like to tell myself to be a better, more consistent writer. And there are writers that are like that. I hear them say that all the time, and I'm envious of them. They always say, oh, I have to write every day. Well, I don't. Again, I'm lazy. I would rather read every day. And I really like writing, but it's